The small diner on the edge of Maplewood was nothing extravagant. Its faded red sign flickered faintly in the evening light, reading, Maggie's Diner, in bold letters that had seen better days. Inside, the air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and buttery pancakes. It wasn't much, but to the locals it was home, a place where everyone knew each other by name, and life moved at a comfortable pace. Sarah Peterson had worked there for 5 years, ever since she graduated high school. At 23, she still wore her apron with pride, even though the tips weren't great and the hours were long. She loved her job, not because of the money or the work itself, but because she enjoyed helping people. Whether it was refilling someone's coffee cup or offering a warm smile to a weary traveler, Sarah believed that kindness mattered. And tonight, as always, she carried that belief with her. It was nearing closing time when he walked in. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing his arrival. He hesitated for a moment, scanning the nearly empty room before stepping inside. His clothes were worn and patched up, his shoes scuffed from miles of walking, a scruffy beard covered. His face and his eyes held a deep weariness, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Sarah watched him take a seat by the window, far from the few remaining customers. Something about him tugged at her heartstrings. Maybe it was the way he slouched in his chair, defeated, or how he kept glancing at the menu board without really looking at it. Whatever it was, she couldn't ignore it. Grabbing her notepad, she made her way over to his table. "Hi there," she said cheerfully, trying to sound casual. "Can I get you anything?" The man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to notice him. For a moment, he just stared at her, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, clearing his throat, he replied, "Just water. If that's okay." His voice was soft, almost hesitant, like he was afraid to ask for too much. Sarah nodded, jotting down his request on her notepad. But as she turned to leave, something stopped her. She glanced back at him, noticing how thin his frame was beneath his oversized jacket. No one who looked like they hadn't eaten in days should go hungry. Not under her watch. Without saying another word, Sarah headed to the kitchen. Moments later, she returned with a tray carrying a tall glass of water and a plate of pancakes drizzled with syrup alongside a side of scrambled eggs. Setting it down gently in front of him, she smiled. "You didn't order this," he said, surprised. "No, but everyone deserves a good meal," she replied simply, giving him an encouraging nod. "On the house." For a second, he just stared at the food, his expression unreadable. Then slowly a faint smile broke across his face. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Sarah said, shrugging lightly, as if it were no big deal. As he began eating, Sarah noticed the gratitude in his eyes. Each bite seemed deliberate, savoring every flavor as if it were his first real meal in ages. She lingered for a moment longer, making sure he was comfortable before returning to her duties. But throughout the rest of her shift, she found herself stealing glances at him, wondering about the story behind those tired eyes. When the clock struck 10, signaling the diner's closing time, Sarah started cleaning up. Most of the customers had already left except for the stranger, who was now nursing his third cup of coffee. As she approached his table to clear it, she noticed he was holding a crumpled dollar bill in his hand. "For you," he said, placing it on the table. "I know it's not much, but it's more than enough," Sarah interrupted gently, pushing the money back toward him. "Really, don't worry about it." He hesitated, then nodded, slipping the bill back into his pocket. There was a brief silence between them, broken only by the hum of the diner's old refrigerator. Finally, he spoke again. "You're kind," he said quietly. "Not many people would have done what you did tonight." Sarah shrugged modestly. "It's just food. Anyone else would have done the same." But the man shook his head. "No, they wouldn't. Trust me, I've been around." His words lingered in the air as Sarah finished tidying up. When she finally locked the door behind him, watching him disappear into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter meant something more. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, one that would change her life forever. That night, as Sarah drove home, she replayed the events in her mind. The mysterious stranger, the gratitude in his eyes, the quiet dignity he carried despite his circumstances. It all felt significant somehow. She didn't realize it yet, but fate had bigger plans in store for her, plans that would test her courage, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately lead her to discover the true power of compassion. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of the sleepy town, the stranger walked on, clutching the memory of Sarah's kindness, like a beacon of hope. What neither of them knew was that their paths were destined to cross again, and next time, the stakes would be higher than either could imagine. The next morning, Sarah woke up with the stranger still on her mind. She couldn't quite explain why. He was just another customer, someone who had come and gone like so many others before him. Yet there was something about his demeanor, the way he carried himself despite his hardships, that stuck with her. It wasn't uncommon for people passing through Maplewood to stop at Maggie's diner. The town was a quiet pit stop along the highway, attracting weary travelers and truck drivers looking for a warm meal. But this man felt different. When Sarah arrived at work later that day, she expected things to go back to normal. The diner buzzed, with its usual rhythm, locals chatting over breakfast, children laughing as they spun sugar packets into makeshift toys, and the faint clatter of dishes being washed in the kitchen. As she tied her apron around her waist, Sarah pushed thoughts of the stranger out of her head. Life here was predictable, comforting even, and yet deep down, she wondered if she'd ever see him again. Her question was answered sooner than she expected. Around mid-afternoon, when the lunch rush had died down and the diner was nearly empty, the bell above the door jingled once more. Sarah glanced up instinctively and her heart skipped a beat. There he was, the same man from last night standing awkwardly by the entrance. His clothes were still worn, but today he seemed less hunched, as though some invisible weight had lifted slightly. "Hey," Sarah greeted him warmly, walking over with her notepad in hand. "Didn't think we'd see you again so soon." He smiled faintly, a hint of shyness in his expression. "I wasn't planning on coming back," he admitted, "but I wanted to say thank you properly." Sarah waved it off. "No need to thank me. Like I said, it's just food." "It's more than that," he insisted. "What you did last night, it meant something more than you know." His words puzzled her, but she didn't press further. Instead, she gestured toward the counter. "Why don't you grab a seat? I'll bring you something to eat." This time, he didn't argue. He slid onto a stool near the window, watching silently as Sarah prepared his meal. When she returned with a plate of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, he thanked her again, this time with an intensity that made her pause. Over the next few days, the stranger became a regular visitor. Every afternoon, like clockwork, he showed up at the diner, ordering simple meals and sipping coffee while gazing out the window. At first, Sarah thought nothing of it. After all, plenty of customers came in daily. But as the days turned into weeks, their conversations grew, longer, deeper. He began sharing fragments of his life with her, little glimpses into who he was beyond the tired face and frayed jacket. One rainy Tuesday, when the diner was unusually quiet, he finally opened up. "I've been traveling for months," he confessed, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "Not because I want to, but because I have to. Sometimes it feels like I'm running away from something, or maybe searching for it." "What are you searching for?" Sarah asked softly, intrigued. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Answers, I guess. Or maybe proof that not everything is broken, that there's still good left in the world." His words struck a chord with Sarah. In a way, she understood what he meant. Life wasn't always fair, and sometimes it felt like kindness was a rare commodity. But she believed, even stubbornly, that small acts of compassion could make a difference. "You're looking in the right place," she joked lightly, gesturing toward the cozy diner. He chuckled, but there was a sadness in his eyes that lingered. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe I already found it in you." Sarah blushed, unsure how to respond. Before she could say anything, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled business card. Sliding it across the table, he added, "Here, Take this. Curious, Sarah picked it up and read the bold letters printed on it. Alexander Reed, CEO, Reed Enterprises. Her jaw dropped. You're kidding, she stammered, staring at him in disbelief. I'm not, he replied, his tone serious. That's me, or at least who I used to be. Sarah struggled to process what she was hearing. This man sitting in front of her, a former CEO of a major company, was worlds apart from the image she'd formed in her mind. How could someone so wealthy end up wandering the streets eating free meals at a roadside diner? I lost everything, Alexander explained, reading the confusion on her face. My business collapsed, my family fell apart, I hit rock bottom. For a while, I didn't know who I was anymore. So I decided to leave everything behind to start over to understand what truly matters. And did you? Sarah asked cautiously. He nodded slowly. Yes, thanks to people like you. Tears pricked at the corners of Sarah's eyes. She had never imagined that her simple act of kindness would mean so much to someone. To her, it had been natural, an extension of who she was. But to Alexander it had been a lifeline, a reminder of humanity's goodness when he needed it most. As the rain continued to patter against the windows, Alexander leaned forward, his voice steady, but filled with purpose. You've done so much for me without expecting anything in return. I want to repay you somehow. Sarah shook her head immediately. You don't owe me anything, she protested. I didn't help you so you'd pay me back. I know, Alexander said gently. But let me do this, not as repayment, but as gratitude. Let me show you that your kindness can create ripples far beyond what you imagine. Before she could argue further, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. Inside was a platinum credit card, gleaming under the diner's fluorescent lights. Tomorrow morning, he said firmly. We're going shopping. New clothes, groceries, whatever you need, no arguments. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but one look at his determined expression told her it was pointless. Reluctantly, she agreed, though guilt gnawed at her. She didn't feel comfortable accepting charity, especially from someone who had so little, himself. But Alexander wasn't finished yet. This isn't just about helping you, he continued. It's about showing you your worth. You deserve better than working 12-hour shifts at a diner. You deserve to dream bigger, to live a life where your kindness is rewarded instead of taken for granted. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to entertain the possibility. Could she step outside the confines of her predictable life? Could she dare to believe that she was capable of more? As the storm outside began to subside, Sarah realized that her encounter with Alexander was no accident. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a journey that would challenge her beliefs, push her boundaries, and ultimately reveal the true power of compassion. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a mixture of excitement and unease swirling in her chest. She had spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying Alexander's words in her mind. You deserve better, he had said. But did she? Sarah had always been content with her life at Maggie's diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that paid the bills. Still, his words lingered, planting seeds of doubt about whether she was truly living up to her potential. When she arrived at the diner later that day, Alexander was already waiting for her outside. This time he looked different, cleaner, more put together. His scruffy beard was trimmed neatly and he wore a crisp button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans. Gone was the worn-out jacket. Instead, he carried a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. He smiled warmly as she approached, holding out a cup of coffee from the local cafe. Good morning, he greeted her. I figured you'd need this before we dive into the day. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, though she couldn't help but feel awkward. You didn't have to do all this, she muttered, gesturing vaguely toward his new appearance. Wanted to, Alexander replied simply. Besides, I owed myself a fresh start too. With that, they climbed into his car, a sleek black sedan parked discreetly behind the diner. and headed toward town. Their first stop was a clothing store, where Alexander insisted on buying Sarah an entirely new wardrobe. At first she resisted fiercely, refusing to let him spend money on her. But Alexander wouldn't take no for an answer. "This isn't charity," he explained patiently. "It's investment. In you." Reluctantly, Sarah began trying on outfits, under his guidance. To her surprise, she found herself enjoying it, not because of the clothes themselves, but because of how empowering it felt to see herself in a new light. For years she had dressed plainly, prioritizing comfort over style. Now, standing in front of the mirror in tailored blazers and elegant dresses, she barely recognized the confident woman staring back at her. "You look incredible," Alexander said sincerely as she stepped out of the fitting room wearing a navy blue dress. "See? I told you there's more to you than meets the eye." Sarah blushed, feeling both flattered and overwhelmed. She wasn't used to receiving compliments or gifts from anyone, let alone someone like Alexander. Their shopping spree continued throughout the day, with stops at a grocery store, a bookstore, and even a salon where Sarah got her hair styled. By the time they returned to the diner late in the afternoon, Sarah felt like a completely different person. Yet despite the whirlwind of changes, one thing remained constant: the kindness in Alexander's eyes. That evening, after locking up the diner, Sarah invited him to sit down at one of the booths. She needed answers, to understand why he was doing all this for her. "Why me?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "There are plenty of people who deserve help more than I do." Alexander leaned back in his seat, studying her thoughtfully. "Because you reminded me of what really matters," he said after a moment. "When I was at my lowest point, drowning in self-pity, you treated me with dignity. You didn't judge me or pity me. You just saw a human being in need and helped, without expecting anything in return. That kind of compassion is rare, Sarah, and it deserves to be rewarded." His words brought tears to her eyes. She had never thought of herself as special, but hearing him describe her actions in such glowing terms made her realize that maybe, just maybe, she had something valuable to offer the world. But Alexander wasn't done surprising her yet. "Now," he continued, pulling out a folder from his satchel, "it's time for the next step." Curious, Sarah opened the folder and gasped. Inside were detailed plans, financial projections, and sketches for a brand new diner. What is this?" she stammered, flipping through the pages. "It's your future," Alexander replied with a grin. "I want to invest in Maggie's diner. Not just renovate it, but expand it. Turn it into a chain while keeping its original charm intact. And I want you to run it, with me as your partner." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said firmly. "You've built something amazing here, Sarah. A place where people feel welcome, cared for. Imagine what you could achieve if you had the resources to grow." For a long moment, Sarah sat in silence, processing everything he had said. The idea of turning Maggie's Diner into a franchise sounded exciting, but also terrifying. Could she handle the responsibility? What if she failed? As if reading her thoughts, Alexander placed a reassuring hand on hers. "You won't be alone," he promised. "I'll guide you every step of the way, and remember, this isn't just about business, it's about spreading the same kindness that drew me to this place in the first place." Slowly, Sarah nodded. She still had doubts, fears she couldn't quite shake off. But deep down, she knew Alexander was right. If anyone deserved a chance to dream bigger, it was her. Over the next few weeks, they dove headfirst into planning. Alexander introduced her to architects, designers, and marketing experts, teaching her the ropes of running a successful business. Meanwhile, Sarah worked tirelessly to ensure the diner's soul remained intact. They decided to keep the cozy atmosphere that made Maggie so special, incorporating elements like handwritten menus and vintage decor into each new location. They also launched a program called Pay It Forward Meals, inspired by Sarah's initial act of kindness. Customers could purchase meals for strangers in need, ensuring that no one left the diner hungry. The initiative quickly gained attention, drawing praise from locals and media alike. Despite the challenges, construction delays, budget overruns, and skeptics who doubted their vision, Sarah and Alexander persevered. Together, they proved that success wasn't just about profits. It was about creating something meaningful, something that touched lives. And as the first new location opened its doors months later, Sarah stood proudly beside Alexander, watching as families poured in to experience the magic of Maggie's Diner. She realized then that her journey wasn't just about building a business. It was about honoring the values she held dear. Her story was far from over. But one thing was certain. Sarah Peterson had found her purpose. And thanks to Alexander's belief in her, she was ready to share it with the world. Expanding Maggie's Diner into a chain was no easy feat. While Sarah and Alexander had big dreams, the road to achieving them was paved with obstacles that tested their resolve, patience, and partnership. The initial excitement of planning gave way to the harsh realities of construction delays, budget overruns, and criticism from skeptics who doubted whether a small-town diner could succeed on a larger scale. The first major hurdle came during the renovation of the original location. Contractors ran into structural issues with the building's foundation, which required costly repairs. Delays piled up, pushing back the grand reopening date by weeks. Meanwhile, Sarah struggled to keep morale high among her staff, many of whom were anxious about how the changes would affect their jobs. Some employees feared losing the intimate, family-like atmosphere they cherished, while others worried they wouldn't fit into the more polished environment Alexander envisioned. "Change is hard," Alexander reminded Sarah one evening as they sat in her office surrounded by blueprints and invoices. "But it's necessary if we want to grow." "I know," Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's just, I never imagined it would be this difficult. Everyone's counting on us, and sometimes I feel like I'm letting them down." Alexander placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not letting anyone down. You're doing exactly what you need to do, leading with heart. That's what makes this place special." His words helped, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a tightrope. On one side was her desire to preserve the diner's soul. On the other was the pressure to adapt to modern expectations. It didn't help that some locals voiced their disapproval openly. "They're selling out," muttered an elderly regular named Mr. Thompson during a town meeting. "Turning our little diner into some corporate chain. Next thing you know, we'll have drive-thrus and frozen fries." Sarah felt the sting of his words deeply. She had always prided herself on being part of the community, someone everyone trusted. Hearing accusations of betrayal hurt more than she cared to admit. But instead of lashing out, she invited Mr. Thompson and other critics to tour the renovated diner before its official opening. "We're not changing who we are," she explained earnestly. "We're just adding more chairs at the table so we can welcome even more people." Her sincerity won over many doubters, including Mr. Thompson, who admitted after the tour, "Well, it still smells like pancakes and coffee in here. Guess you haven't gone completely fancy on us yet." Despite these victories, challenges continued to mount. One particularly tough blow came when a rival restaurant owner launched a smear campaign, accusing Maggie's Diner of cutting corners on food quality to save money. Social media buzzed with negative comments and customer traffic dipped noticeably. "It's all lies," Sarah fumed, pacing back and forth in her office. "We've worked so hard to maintain our standards. How can they say things like that?" Alexander remained calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. "This happens in business," he said evenly. "People will try to bring you down because they're afraid of your success. But we can't let them win. Instead, we prove them wrong, with actions, not anger." Together, they devised a plan to address the rumors head-on. They invited local journalists and influencers to visit the diner, offering behind-the-scenes tours of their kitchen operations. Sarah personally walked each guest through the meticulous preparation process, emphasizing their commitment to fresh ingredients and homemade recipes. Within days, positive reviews began flooding social media, silencing the critics. Another challenge arose when Sarah realized she needed to delegate more responsibilities. As the chain expanded to multiple locations, managing everything herself became impossible. At first, she resisted hiring additional managers, fearing they wouldn't share her vision or values, but Alexander gently encouraged her to trust others. "You can't do everything alone," he told her one night as they reviewed staffing plans. "If you want this to work, you have to let go a little. Surround yourself with people who believe in what you're building." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. With Alexander's guidance, she hired a team of dedicated managers who shared her passion for kindness and hospitality. Over time, she learned to step back and allow them to take ownership of their roles, freeing her to focus on the bigger picture. As months passed, the challenges began to feel less overwhelming and more like stepping stones. Each obstacle taught Sarah something new about leadership, resilience, and the importance of staying true to her core values. Through it all, Alexander remained her steadfast partner, cheering her on and reminding her why they started this journey in the first place. One sunny afternoon, as Sarah stood outside the third Maggie's Diner location during its grand opening, she felt a surge of pride. Families streamed in, greeted by smiling staff members and the familiar aroma of pancakes and coffee. A banner above the entrance read, "Welcome to Maggie's, where kindness serves everyone." "This is incredible," Alexander said, joining her with a proud smile. "Look at what you've built." Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "Not just me," she corrected softly. "Us. This wouldn't have happened without you." He chuckled lightly. "I may have given you the tools, but you're the one who made it happen. Never forget that." For the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to fully embrace the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Yes, the journey had been difficult, filled with moments of doubt and frustration. But it had also been rewarding beyond measure. She had taken a simple act of kindness and turned it into something extraordinary, a legacy of compassion that touched countless lives. And yet, as she watched families laugh and share meals under the warm glow of the diner's lights, Sarah knew this wasn't the end. There was still so much more to do, so many more tables to set and hearts to feed. With Alexander by her side and her unwavering belief in kindness guiding her, she was ready to face whatever came next. Years passed, and Maggie's Diner became more than just a chain of restaurants. It became a movement. What started as a humble roadside diner in the small town of Maplewood had grown into a nationwide phenomenon, celebrated not only for its delicious food but also for its mission of spreading kindness. The Pay It Forward Meals program expanded exponentially, allowing customers across the country to contribute to meals for those in need. By the 5th anniversary of the first new location, Maggie's Diner had served over 1 million free meals to struggling families, veterans, and homeless individuals. Sarah Peterson, once a shy waitress who doubted her own worth, now stood at the forefront of this incredible journey. She traveled frequently, speaking at conferences, appearing on television shows, and sharing her story with audiences eager to hear how one act of kindness could spark such profound change. Yet despite her newfound fame, she remained grounded, always reminding herself and others that success wasn't about wealth or recognition. It was about making a difference. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah returned to the original Maggie's Diner in Maplewood. It had been months since she'd visited, her schedule consumed by meetings, interviews, and ribbon cuttings for new locations. But today felt different. Today, she needed to reconnect with her roots, to remember why she had embarked on this journey in the first place. As she pulled into the parking lot, nostalgia washed over her. The faded red sign still flickered faintly above the entrance, though it had been updated with modern LED lights. Inside, the cozy atmosphere remained unchanged. Handwritten menus adorned the walls. Vintage booths welcomed patrons, and the air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and buttery pancakes. "Sarah," called out Becky, one of the longtime waitresses, rushing over to greet her with a hug. "We've missed you around here." "I've missed being here," Sarah replied warmly, looking around the bustling room. Families chatted over breakfast, truck drivers refueled with steaming cups of coffee, and children giggled as they spun sugar packets into makeshift toys. It was exactly as she remembered, a place where everyone belonged. Later that afternoon, Alexander arrived, his presence instantly bringing a sense of calm to the busy diner. Though he no longer played an active role in the business, preferring instead to focus on his philanthropic endeavors, he remained a close friend and mentor to Sarah. Together, they stepped outside, standing beneath the old oak tree that shaded the diner's patio. "It's hard to believe how far we've come," Alexander said, gazing at the building fondly. "I know," Sarah agreed, her voice tinged with awe. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming. How did we turn something so small into something so big?" "You didn't just build a business, Sarah," Alexander replied thoughtfully. "You built a community. You reminded people that kindness isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And that's why Maggie's Diner resonates with so many." His words struck a chord deep within her. Over the years, she had often questioned whether she was truly worthy of the praise and admiration she received. But hearing Alexander frame their success as a testament to compassion rather than ambition made everything click into place. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah hosted a special gathering at the diner. Employees, friends, family members, and loyal customers filled the space, laughing and reminiscing about the early days of Maggie's. At the center of it all stood Sarah, holding a microphone and preparing to address the crowd. "When I opened this diner 5 years ago," she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I never imagined it would become what it is today. I just wanted to create a place where people felt welcome, cared for, and loved. And somehow along the way that vision grew bigger than I ever dreamed possible." She paused, glancing around the room at familiar faces. "None of this would have happened without each and every one of you. You believed in me when I doubted myself. You supported this dream even when it seemed impossible. And most importantly, you embodied the spirit of kindness that defines Maggie's Diner." The room erupted in applause, tears streaming down many faces. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "But our work isn't done. There are still hungry bellies to feed, lonely hearts to comfort, and communities to uplift. So let's keep going. Together. Let's show the world that kindness can conquer anything." As the celebration carried on late into the night, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her here. From feeding a struggling stranger to building a national chain rooted in compassion, her journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. Yet she knew none of it would have been possible without the lessons she had learned along the way. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was taking action despite it. She had discovered that leadership wasn't about control. It was about empowering others. And perhaps most importantly, she had realized that true success wasn't measured by profits or accolades. It was measured by the lives touched and the hearts healed. Weeks later, Sarah found herself sitting at a booth in the original diner, sipping coffee and watching the morning sunlight stream through the windows. Across from her sat a young woman named Lily, a former foster child who had benefited from the Pay It Forward Meals program during her teenage years. Now grown up and pursuing a degree in social work, Lily had returned to thank Sarah personally. "When you changed my life," Lily said softly, her eyes shining with gratitude. "When I didn't think anyone cared, your diner reminded me that there's still good in the world." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing Lily's hand gently. "Thank you for reminding me why we do what we do," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Moments like these reaffirmed Sarah's belief in the power of kindness. Every meal served, every smile shared, every act of generosity rippled outward, creating waves of positivity that extended far beyond the diner's walls. Meanwhile, Alexander continued his travels, using his resources to support grassroots initiatives inspired by Maggie's Diner. Together, he and Sarah had sparked a global conversation about the importance of compassion in business and everyday life. Their partnership, born out of a single act of kindness, had transformed not only their lives but countless others as well. As the years rolled on, Maggie's Diner remained a beacon of hope, a testament to the idea that even the smallest gestures could ignite monumental change. For Sarah, it was proof that kindness wasn't just a virtue, It was a force capable of shaping the world. And standing outside the diner one evening, gazing at the neon sign that now read Sarah's Place, she smiled. Her journey had been long and challenging, but it had also been beautiful. Through it all, she had stayed true to herself, proving that a single act of kindness could indeed create ripples far greater than anyone could imagine. In the end, Sarah's legacy wasn't about the number of diners or meals served. It was about the countless lives touched by love, empathy, and humanity. And as she looked toward the future, she knew the best was yet to come.